يا سيدي يا رسول الله صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة غريب يا مظلوم عطشان كربلاء سيدي إن لم يجبك بدني عند استغاثتك أو لساني عند استنصارك فقد أجابك قلبي وسمعي وبصري ما خاب من تمسك بكم وأمن من لجأ إليكم يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما أما بعد يقول الله في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنما يخشى الله من عباده العلماء آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد My brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How does one become an Ayatollah? How does a person achieve the status of ilm through study, through struggle of pursuing Islamic sciences and becoming known as an Ayatollah? This is not necessarily a career many mu'minun set out to accomplish. It's not like there's a job application that is out there waiting. If you're interested in becoming an Ayatollah al-Uzma, you must first have these many years in your CV, accomplish this much, a few words of recommendation by other qualified individuals, and you fit the bill. An Ayatollah appears to be a status that is given rather than attained by one's own measures. And I'll tell you what it is not. Especially lately, in light of the events that we have seen across the world, the term Ayatollah became synonymous with a head of state, because one of the greatest heads of state happens to be an Ayatollah. But it appears to be the case that there is a homogenization of the status and the title of an Ayatollah and a head of nationalism being either from Iraq or from the country of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And now the reality is politics may have an involvement to the status of the role of an Ayatollah, but the qualities and the conditions that make someone become an Ayatollah al-Uzma, Marja' al-Dini al-A'la, these have a set amount of requirements that many don't realize that they already have inside them. Untapped potential that men, and this leads to the following question, that women may also be able to accomplish. And I'd like to examine this discussion with you all by taking a little bit of look into the pages of history as to who was genuinely the first Ayatollah within our heritage and scholarship. Because you're not a Shi'i unless you recognize and love the status of some of these people. This is what makes up our identity, that we refer back to those who have strived and struggled, and we take them not just as religious guidelines and navigators within Islamic law, but as leaders. You're proud to see that the person you emulate is also a humanitarian leader, someone nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, someone who, when injustice happened, he said no, someone who not only talked the talk, walked the walk, and made the whole globe say that, Ya Allah, this man who looks like Jesus with his clothing, who looks like a figure in prophetic history, plucked from that scene and put into our 21st century, who is it that can shake the world and change it whether it's through a revolution, whether it's through one fatwa and slapping Daesh in the face, whether it's through a series of sacrifices, these make up our identity and we will not compromise. You make fun of them, you make fun of me. That is my second best option after the Ma'soom. After the A'imah and the Anbiya and the advent of a publicly accessible Imam where I am unable to meet, the next best thing is, logically speaking, those who are able to understand God's law. But how does one become this? In the pages of history, you notice titles. The term Ayatollah, if you were to break it down, sign of God. By the root of this definition, everything's a sign of God. Everything is ayat of Allah. You are an ayatullah. By that angle and that perspective. And if you add Ayatollah al-Uzma, you begin to imply that this is the biggest sign of Allah. And one of the titles and merits of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam is Ayatollah al-Uzma. He's the greatest sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. So this has led a few to ask a couple questions regarding our system of marja'iyya and ulama. That can you with full confidence actually say that this scholar is the greatest sign of Allah? Last I checked, we have honorary titles of status, of synonymity as well. And in the world today, why can't I say that the greatest sign today, now, because Ahlul Bayt, as much as they are alive today, the closest living example to embody the zuhd, the ilm, the sacrifice, the strength, the power is this. So in one sense, in the world today, al-an, this is your first response. Al-an, right now, confidently, that's Ayatollah al-Uzma. Whether the marja is sitting in Najaf or in Qom or in Tehran, he is the greatest one right now of the biggest ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But realistically speaking, everything's an ayah of Allah. Everything's a sign of God to some extent. And that's why if you look at what the Quran called an ayah of Allah, it's not a marja' deen. It's not a sheikh or a sayyid. It was a camel. The camel of Salih. What did Allah call it in the Holy Quran? He called it an ayah of Allah. Ayatullah. It's a sign of Allah that a camel can miraculously emerge from a mountain and give this town of the people of Mada'in of Salih some provisions and nutrients when they were going through struggle, and they were told, just don't kill it. Is that too hard to ask? And they killed it, and as a sign of Allah, Allah's rijz and calamity befell upon them. This, Allah says, is an ayah of Allah. So the term is a very large, broad one that can apply to everything. At the moment, certain hegemonies that control media tell you that Ayatollah is some individual that has a vested interest in killing non-Muslims. Habibi, you were reading stories in books and you decide to superimpose your brainwashed narrative. It's a sign of Allah, that is all. But today, there's an application to it. And every single ayatullah is a mujtahid, which inshallah is also another term. If you're a Shia, it's important to know because it affects your life. Either by you following decisions that these grand individuals have made clear, or in some way or the other, the decisions they make reach you somehow. The news gets to them. So it's important that we have a greater right. We are awla in first understanding when certain news reporters and channels come and say that an ayatollah is synonymous with some hate dictator, astaghfirullah, that we know first of all what this term means and where it comes from. If you look back, history shows us that in Shia scholarship and heritage, the first ayatollah by title was granted by society towards one alim, and we all should know his name as well, Al-Allam al-Hilli. Al-Allamat al-Hilli was a scholar who was around the times where you found even figures like Ibn Taymiyyah also lived. And Al-Allam al-Hilli had debates with this man who wrote Minhaj al-Sunnah, who the Salafi worldview see him as basically the gospel truth of what Rasulullah intended. And you would see the debates would happen. And so he wrote the book where he debated Al-Allam al-Hilli. And in this book, Al-Allama al-Hilli, he goes by the name of Ibn al-Mutahhar. This was his title. Ibn Taymiyyah debates him and he says, Ya ibn al-Munajjas, the son of impurity. While Al-Allama, when he refers to him, he calls him Al-Shaykh, because he recognizes that you are a scholar to these individuals, but I won't stoop down to your akhlaq. And that's the beauty of our ulama. And that's why among the people to call him Ayatollah before even some of the Shia or the non-Shia. Like, this man is very impressive. And you'll notice, by the way, many of our ulama are recognized before the Shia by non-Shia. Al-Shaykh al-Mufid, that's not his name, that's his title. But he was called Al-Mufid because he was useful even to those who were non-Shia. He would answer and help them and guide them and navigate them. These are our ulama. We don't care who you are. You're going to be a recipient of our product. You will benefit. And that's why Shaykh al-Kulayni, the author of Al-Kafi, his name is Thiqatul Islam al-Kulayni, Sunnatan wa Shi'a. Hessa, if you want to be rude and you would like to be inappropriate, that's not warrant for us to be like you and stoop down to your level. That's what an Ayatollah is. Al-Allam al-Hilli, what made him outstanding, what made him remarkable, is that we owe him a great deal of respect and thanks. He was a catalyst figure in having Iran embrace Tashayyu', because many look into Iran, the country of Persia at that time, and they examine that it began its roots in non-Shi'i belief system, and the foundation wasn't Tashayyu' at the very beginning. The conquesting and the expansionalism occurred during the reign of the second caliph, and when that happened, it fell. He embraced the lands of Persia, and they just became Sunni by force. That was what is called al-Wathiqa al-Umariyya. He became Sunni by force. My father, Sayyid Basim al-Shara', was debating a Christian evangelical, and this is online on YouTube and on their channel as well. And the Christian evangelical is debating a Shia scholar. And so in the debates, he says Islam is extremely bloody. He says, why? He says, because al-Wathiqa al-Umariyya. This is a Chaldean Iraqi, the debate is in Arabic, debating a Shia scholar in Najaf. Like, what are you talking about? He's like, Umar ibn al-Khattab, in his conquest, sold slaves. He did the following acts. He abused people. He just spread Islam by force. He says, the same complaint you have is the same one I have. Had we held on to Ahl al-Bayt, that's all I say. You have every right to have those complaints. And even in these moments, Ahl al-Bayt got involved. Notice how when Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen involves himself in some of these major political decisions, because people will say, where was Imam Ali when they were in charge? He was very much working behind the scenes, but he was given no access in front of the scenes. When the conquests happened, Imam Ali would give them advice. How they would act on that advice was up to them, and they wouldn't at times. You had a lady by the name of Shahr Zanan, who fell victim as a captive of war in Persia. She is the daughter of Yazdajurd II. Yazdajurd II is a king of Persia during that time period. And when she fell victim of war, you know what happens to victims of wars, and especially with women as well. They just get sold like commodity. Imam Ali stepped in. He said, Ya Umar, she lived her life very much in luxury. She was a princess, and now she will be sold enslaved. How are we to respond on the day of judgment? Where Allah, and she complains, she would say, look what Islam did to me. I went from up, down. I became humiliated. And Islam only brings people up. Umar ibn al-Khattab said, so what do you have to say? Imam Ali said, I insist, instead of selling her, tell her what she would like to do. She said, I'm not interested in being sold, but I would like to get married. And there's a man among these men who I notice has upright akhlaq, who hasn't hurt anyone, who hasn't used foul language. And I decide if he's willing, I will be open in marrying him. And he was asked, and that was Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Imam Hussein married her. When he married her, she said, and I have one request. My name is the lady of women of her land, Shah Zanan. She's like, can you change it? She's like, why? He's like, because the lady of the land of the world is Sayyida Zahra alayhi salam, Sayyidatu Nisa al-Alameen in Farsi. Can you change it into Shahra Banu? Change it to the lady of her land, not the whole entire world, which shows you her worldview and where she is. But this goes to show Ahlul Bayt will get involved. Persia fell as a result of this conquest, and they all became non-Shia, so naturally they became Sunni. What caused them to become Shia? Al-Allam al-Hilli, at the time there was a sultan that ruled during the Mongol Empire. This is the 7th generation rule, and that 7th generation grandson by the name of Muhammad Hassan. He had a problem, a jurisprudential problem. The stories are 2 versions. I will tell you both of them. He saw the Hanafi Imam of the non-Shia school argue with the Hanbali one, and he was so disenfranchised about the argument of 2 scholars that he was just not solid in his faith. He's like, if scholars can fight, how do I know I'm following the truth? So Al-Allam Al-Hilli took this as an opportunity to say, hey, there's another madhab. Have you considered the Ja'fari school? And that made him consider. The other version tends to be a bit more impressive. Both of them are solid though. It could be both. Al-Allama Al-Hilli noticed that the king, the Sultan, Muhammad Hassan, divorced his wife by saying, طلقتك 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 3 times. Now in the fiqh of the schools of our brothers and sisters, that is sufficient for a solid talaq, meaning divorce. Because if you divorce thrice, 3 times, you're out. And so he said, but I was mad. And I just yelled at her as such. I don't want to divorce her. Because the man calms down, gets his senses. Ya Allah, I made a big mistake. Give me the alim that represents my madhab. So he appeared to be on the madhab of Abu Hanifa, the Ahnaf. Says, oh Imam of Abu Hanifa, of his way, is my talaq shar'i? Ya Ami, I was just mad. I didn't mean it. He said, did you say talaqtuki? He says, yes. Did you say it 3 times? You're divorced. Dang it, can I take her back? Like, no, you can't. Then maybe the other madhab might have some more. He calls the Hanbali school of thought Imam, and the Imam says, did you say the talaq 3 times? He says, yes. He says, whether you meant it or not, you said it. Those are the sigha, man. You should have kept it together. I'm sorry. You're divorced. He goes to the Shafi'i Imam. The Shafi'i man says, if you said it, you're thrice, you're out. He goes to the last one, the Maliki Imam. He's like, I'm so sorry. He's like, is there no one that can help me in this situation? They told him there's one madhab. It's a small one. They call themselves the Ja'fari. He says, who's their Kabir al-Qawm? Who's the big one of them? He says, Al-Allam al-Hilli, Ibn al-Mutahhar al-Hilli, who lives in Iraq. He said, call him to Ray Tahran now. So they bring him an official request. The Sultan demands your presence. He goes and he enters the palace. Historians report the following interesting, unorthodox incident. Al-Allama entered the majlis, you may have heard the story, and he takes his sandals, pardon the example, but he takes his slippers and he puts them, conceals them under his arm as such. And he walks in. And the king says, excuse me, the shoes stay back here. He says, oh no, it's sorry. I heard a hadith by Rasulullah in the hadith. It says that beware when you enter a gathering where there is a Hanafi Imam. The Ahnaf, they have a tendency of stealing shoes. So I decided to hold my shoe here just in case that guy wants to steal it. The Hanafi Imam jumps in and says, wait a minute. Abu Hanifa and Nu'man ibn Thabit, Rasulullah would never say that about him. He says, why? Because he came 40 years after Rasulullah. He says, sorry. It must have been the Maliki Imam. The Maliki Imam jumps in. He says, la, wait, Baba, slow down. Malik ibn Anas came about 50 years after Rasulullah. He says, sorry. It's the Shafi'i. Rasulullah was referring to, if you enter a majlis of the Shawafi, be careful. The Shafi'i Imam has a tendency of stealing your na'ala, jalakum Allah. He says, no, the Shawafi came about 80 years. What are you talking about? The Rasulullah couldn't have said that about us. He says, it must have been the Hanbali one. The Hanbali Imam comes and says the same thing. And then at the end of this, all of them, they said, no, we were not there during the time of the Prophet. He says, that's exactly why I'm here. These opinions were never here during the time of the Prophet, and I follow the Thaqalain, to which Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen made it very clear, a talaq that is done without genuine niyyah and out of anger is not a sufficient one. You're still married to your wife. He becomes happy, and he says, okay, I give you one job, O Allam al-Hilli, the Sultan, you've impressed me. Prove to me that your way is true. Prove it. I don't want to just confirmation bias because I like your fatwa, which is something many of our youth like to do. They say, I like that marja because I like his fatwa. Oh, mashallah, because that's how we, a la carte. Pick here, pick here, pick here. It's like a buffing. Today I'm feeling this fatwa. Habibi, you're talking about God's opinion. It's not something you could just cherry pick. Mish hek? It's God's opinion. God's opinion doesn't change. Halal Muhammad halal ila يوم القيامة وحرامه حرام إلى يوم القيامة. So it's not today this, not today that. Some people pick selectively. This matches my worldview, sometimes even if it doesn't make sense. And I want you to take this with full conviction. It's not telling you accept it whether or not. We are the only worldview, by the way. Wallah, we are. And I'm saying Wallah on the minbar on Muharram. Wallah, we are the only worldview that insist, learn your religion, don't just inherit it. Don't just accept, learn, ask. Quran insists, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ ذِي الْقَرْنَيْنِ وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ السَّاعَةِ وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ. Ask. But in some moments, sometimes you are given an answer, it doesn't quite match your understanding. Just because you don't know doesn't mean that's it. Just because you don't know, if you were to know every single reason, you would become an Ayatollah. And inshallah you are. What do I know? Maybe we're sitting in front of Ayatollah right now. What do I know? Maybe you are. But in the reality is, if it doesn't make sense to you, that doesn't mean it's wrong. First of all, who are you for everything to make sense to you? Sometimes you have to put in some effort. In this context, my dear respected brothers and sisters, we are the only worldview that insists, ask. Muhammad Khulabanda, Sultan comes and says, give me reason to accept. Because I could just say, I liked your answer, so I want to become a Shia now. Give me reason. Not just that. Prove to me your wilayah of Ahl al-Bayt is wajib, and you have 1 week. Write me a book. Do you know what Al-Allama Al-Hilli did? And you hear about Al-Allama all the time. You hear about his name. But how many of you can tell others his contributions and why he's so praised? He's the first Ayatollah as well. How many ayat Allah do you love? It's important to know the number one. Who was he? Allama Al-Hilli, do you know what he said? Challenge accepted. Let's go. Let's do this. It took him 1 week. Do you know what he wrote? Have you ever heard Kitabul Alfain? The Book of 2000s. Have you heard of that book by Allama Al-Hilli? The Book of 2000s is a book of 2,000 dalil, proofs on the wilayah of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. 1,000 from the Nas. 1,000 from the Aql. 1,000 proofs from just narrations and the Quran. That's it. On the wilayah and the authority and the guardianship of Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli. From that which is written. And then he wrote 1,000. He didn't stop. From that which is aql. Aql. Does the aql mean that when Rasulullah dies, he just leaves the world willy-nilly, you figure it out? The aql means and insists that there must be a character. That's one dalil. He puts another one, a third one, a fourth one. He presents these two. How much do you love Al-Jumhuriyya Al-Islamiyya? For good reason, by the way. For good reason. For upright reasons. For the qum that it has, for the mashhad that it has, for the Shah Abdul Azim that it has, for the ulama that it has, for those that it gave birth to in Iraq, in Lebanon, and elsewhere. How much do you love this? He presented this book to the king and he said, today, as for today, until I die, I announce that there is no God but God, Allah, and Muhammad is Rasulullah, the messenger, and Ali ibn Abi Talib is the guardian of all people and the successor after Rasulullah. He issues this as a law. All of that land تشيعت ببركة هذا العالم الجليل العلام الحلي. When you hear Ayatollah, think of these figures. Think of these legends. That's the very first to start off. And until today, we still see the benefits and the fruits and the product of such figures and people. That's why not anyone can become an Ayatollah. Ijtihad is not something simple. Every marja', notice this for the shabab inshallah, every marja' is a mujtahid. Not every mujtahid is a marja'. This is called umum, khusus, mutlaq. What does that mean? What does mujtahid, ijtihad even mean? Break down the words. Ijtihad, from the term juhud, struggle, having struggled vigorously in the Islamic seminary, and then attained a status of malaka, of capability, of extrapolating amaliyatul istinbat al-hukm al-shar'i, the Islamic ruling. Now the ahkam al-shar'iyya isn't your opinion, by the way. It's what you think God wants. And do you know how dangerous that opinion is? You're saying God on Yawm al-Qiyamah will not throw you in hell for following this. You know how much of a burden that feels like to these ulama? That's why there are maraji' who have been studying a mas'ala, one question for example, and after about 3 years of studying such issues or problems, let's say cloning, let's say interest and banking and loans, and at the very end of studying, they issue an opinion. This opinion, they issue it in the stance, how many of you have heard of this definition? Obligatory precaution. Ihtiyat wujubi. Out of ihtiyat. Yani after years of studying a certain issue, you couldn't even have said this is the opinion. You had to say out of precaution. So they would ask the ulama. I remember hearing Sayyid Hadi al-Milani, one of the maraji' in Mashhad al-Muqaddasa. Sayyid Hadi al-Milani was studying a mas'ala for about 4 years with his top quality students near him. After 4 years, he says, guys, here's the opinion finally. The students are there. Sayyid Ali al-Milani was there. He reports the story in Qom right now. He says he issued the opinion. It was about an act, whether it was mustahab or makruh, one of an a'mal from worship. He says, I don't know. But out of precaution, do it instead. They said, Sayyidna, after 4 years, you couldn't even figure out whether yes or no. He says, listen, I'm not comfortable to have my neck be used as a bridge on Yawm al-Qiyamah. If you're comfortable, you can use your neck as a bridge people walk on. I'm not comfortable because I'm trying to convince you this is what Allah wants. If you're confident, do it. That's why our maraji', these ayat of Allah, you know when they issue a fatwa, their hands literally shake like this. One of the maraji' of the time, if you look back, by the way, the most beautiful thing in the world, if you just study the silsila, when you say silsila, you mean the chain that connects one scholar to the other. Let's just look at the A'lamiyya of Najaf. Just look at Najaf al-Ashraf. Who is the grand marja' today of Najaf al-Ashraf? And we all respect and love each of them. Sayyid Ali al-Sistani, may Allah prolong his life, clearly is a disciple directly and most influenced by Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Abu al-Qasim al-Kho'i. He was most influenced by Ayatollah al-Udma al-Shaykh Hussein al-Naini. Shaykh al-Naini is the Sayyid al-Kho'i's teacher. Al-Shaykh, now we're going back in time, yeah? Shaykh al-Naini died 1930s, early 1930s. So that's how far back we're going. Al-Shaykh al-Naini studied under Ayatollah al-Udma al-Shaykh Muhammad Kazim al-Khurasani, otherwise known as Sahib al-Kifaya. Sahib al-Kifaya studied under and was influenced by al-Shaykh Murtada al-Ansari, known as Shaykh al-Azam, the writer of Fara'id al-Usul and Makasib. Shaykh Murtada al-Ansari studied under various figures, among them Ayatollah Sayyid Mohammed Hassan Alsheraa, the famous Thawra of a Tumpak movement fatwa he issued. He studied under Sahib al-Jawahir, Sheikh Muhammad Hassan al-Najmi. He studied under a few people, Sheikh Kashf al-Ghata. He studied under Sheikh Wahid al-Bahbahani. He studied under, keep going, until you hit Sheikh al-Mufid, until you hit Tusi, you hit Ibn Qawlawah al-Qummi, you hit Saduq. Al-Shaykh al-Saduq, you hit his father, who was someone that has studied under Shaykh al-Kulaini. You hit Kulaini, you've now reached where Shaykh al-Kulaini met the third wakil of Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman. Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman's wakil, directly influenced by the second, Muhammad ibn Uthman, by the first, Uthman ibn Sa'id al-Amri. He was a companion of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam, who's a student of his father, al-Imam al-Hadi, who's a student of his father, al-Imam al-Jawad, who's a student of his father, al-Imam al-Rida, who's a student of his father, al-Imam Musa ibn Ja'far, of his father, Ja'far al-Sadiq, of his father, al-Imam al-Baqir, of his father, Zayn al-Abidin, of his father, Hussein al-Shaheed, of his brother, who? Al-Hasan, of his father, Amir al-Mu'mineen, of Rasulullah, his brother, his nafs, his cousin, his father-in-law, of Jibra'il, of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. This silsila dhahabiyya. And I find it laughable. In 2025 comes Mr. 19-year-old, barely knows how to write his name in Arabic, and begins to say this whole institution is not worth anything. Who are you? Where did you come from? With all due love, you're still having your religious awakening. It's okay. But you can't deny that there's a direct linkage back to the Risala, my dear respected brothers and sisters. Ijtihad means struggle. And do you know what struggle means in this context? It's not as easy as, yeah, what is it? Just a couple hadith. Learn the hadith, just learn Arab. It's not even that. It's not even that. Ijtihad is comprised of 3 core elements. Number 1, it takes genuine intelligence in certain discourses, about 7 or 6 of them. Discourses such as what? You would think it's just fiqh. You have to learn terminology and language. Bahth al-alfadh. When you say, and I'll give you an example, it's the equivalent of having about 6 or 9 PhDs in each different relative major. It's not that easy. You have to know Quran, terminologies, jurisprudence, the study of ilm al-rijal, hadith. You have to know modern day issues to be applying to a proper application. There's so much it takes, and you not have to just know, you have to be a master in it. You have to be an expert. That's why they call them jurists. I'll give you one example. And someone once told me, before I came to the great land here of Down Under, someone once asked, say, this example, if you use it, I don't know if people will quite understand you. I said, Habibi, we are dealing with the Flagbearer Foundation people. These guys are all ulama, mashallah. So don't undermine the community I'm coming to. I've heard great things about them. Sydney is a community of learned shabab and shabat. It's like, no, this example's too rough. No, it's not too rough. I'll give you an example. There's a discussion of the principles of jurisprudence. Usul fiqh. This discussion is the very first preliminary discussion that is had in the Hawza. A scholar has an opinion on this one issue. This opinion is applied throughout their entire methodology of Islamic law. It shapes everything. And it can change the conclusion of a fatwa from being haram, halal, mustahab, mubah, wajib. This one thing. And this is just a drop in the ocean of the Islamic sciences. And I'll give you the example. It's called bahthul wadh'. Wadh'. Wadh' means placement. They study this in usul al-fiqh to derive Islamic law, for goodness sake. Wadh' means placement. Placement in what context? Wad'ul alfadh ala al-ma'ani. To place terminologies with their meanings. How do words get their meanings? You would say, why bother studying this? No, it's important. Why? Because I ask you, billah alayk, when Ahlul Bayt speak, salawat rabbi wa salamu alayhim, when they speak, they don't speak out of nonsense. You know why? Because they have a role. Rasulullah, وَمَا يَنطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. Allah says these are thaqalain. The Quran is haqq al-mubin. Ahlul Bayt have to be haqq al-mubin. So when they say words, it was haram for Ahlul Bayt to use redundancies. They won't use al-lamsi wal-gham. They don't use words that are just, throw you off what they truly mean. They have to speak clearly. And that's why one of the signs of an imam is that, and this is not because it's wrong, but the true imam doesn't have a stutter. One of the sons of Imam al-Sadiq by the name of Abdullah al-Aftah, al-Fatahiyya, this was a sect that came and thought he was the next imam. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, his successor is Imam al-Kadhim. But he has a brother named Abdullah. The response came back that Abdullah is not the next imam after Imam al-Sadiq. Why? Because he's paralyzed and he has a cripple and he has a stutter, and he's crippled by his leg but he has a stutter. Like, why is that a big deal? He says because if he's delivering God's laws, he will be a source of confusion. So Allah yabra al-imam an al-uyub is one of the alamat of the a'imma, that they don't have a hard time speaking to you. Because Ahlul Bayt, they respect their language. They don't say anything out of unnecessary redundancy. So you have to study, how do words even get their meanings? This is the first study of usul al-fiqh. First study. It's akin to the study of theology. You're talking about meanings and purpose. It's like, how does this impact fiqh, practically speaking? How does learning how words, I ask you seriously, how does learning how words get their meaning impact fiqh? Big time. It depends. Ulama are divided on two. Are you from team, like Sayyid al-Khoyi was, like a few others, qadasallahu sirra wa asrarahum, where you believe words have meanings intrinsically. ذاتيا. Meaning what? That Ahl al-Bayt could have chosen any word when they spoke to you. For example, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam might say, جاء أسد. A lion came. When you hear Asad, these words, when you hear that, these letters, what comes to your mind? Lion. Imam al-Sadiq teaches you that when I say the word lion, I only mean lion. I don't mean a brave warrior. I don't mean someone strong. I mean the animal. Because if I meant brave warrior, I would have said what? Brave warrior. But sometimes we see hadith that say, Baraz al-Iman kulla. Imam Ali, all of Iman? Yes, in many ways he is. But Rasulullah is also more all of Iman. So how do you know? Based on the context. But however, if I say these words, I promise I meant these words. Are you following? Yes, you are. Ayatollah al-Khoyi says the wada', placing terminologies with their meaning, comes from a view of promise, ta'ahud. I promise whenever I say ma, I mean water. I promise whenever I say lion, I mean the animal. Because if I meant warrior, I would have said warrior. That's one opinion. As-Sayyid al-Sistani has a different opinion. Now you're going to see the differences of scholarly view and how this impacts fatwa and your day to day. But this is based not on just I like it. I genuinely believe Ahlul Bayt, this is how they operate. As-Sayyid al-Sistani says this, no. The wada' of terminologies with their meaning, they get their meanings from a point of tasawwur. When I say Asad, what comes to your mind? That's it. What comes to your mind? How does this impact ahadith? There's a riwayah called Sahihat al-Bazanti. Al-Bazanti is a scholar, a thiqa by the way, he's reliable, he's never lying. And he's a companion of Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. He asks Imam al-Rida, for my shabab, you're going to like this. I asked, he says, سألته على اللحية, about the beard. Can I shave it or no? Can I shave my beard or no? Al-Imam al-Rida replied, alayhi salam, he said, أما من العارضين, as for the side of your face like this, the cheeks right here, فخذ منها, take from it. Yes, you can. وأما من المقدم, as for the front, فلا, you can't. So based on just this one hadith, what would the fatwa look like? That you could trim the side, أأخذ منها, you can take from here, but you can't trim the front. Because this is the Shar'i beard according to this riwayah. Sayyid al-Khoyi, because his opinion of wada' is what? Promise. When I say akhad, when I say lion, I mean that word. A'akhudha in English means trim. Khadh. What does shave completely mean? Halq. Halq. So the Imam is saying you can trim the sides, you can't even trim the front. Sayyid al-Khoyi says this is a sahih hadith, yes. But Imam al-Rida, how could he say you can't even trim the front? Yani you just leave it to hit the floor? Or the Imam himself, bi-abi huwa wa ummi, would take care of his facial hair, would trim this. So how do I square that circle? Do you get the issue? A'akhudha. He's like, you can take from here. You can't take from here. Because akhad means trim. Halq, shave, completely zero, is completely shave off. He says, you can't even trim this. It's a sahih hadith. Guess what Sayyid al-Khoyi did? He says, this, I'm going to reject it. Sahih hadith, rejects it. Because my methodology doesn't apply here. That's how confident he is about his methodology. You're talking about an alim, guys. Sayyid al-Sistani comes, I have a different opinion. Because to me, terminologies get their meaning through what? Through what comes to your mind. The dalala is tasawwariya, not tasdiqiyya. Tasdiqiyya means sidq. When I say Asad, I only mean Asad. It could mean warrior, then he would have said warrior. Do you get it? That's how Ahlul Bayt operate. And Imam al-Rida said, you can trim from here, but you can't trim from here. As-Sayyid al-Sistani looks at this hadith, based on his methodology, and he says, Sahih, akhadh, take, does mean trim, but it could also mean full clean shave. Usually there's a word for full clean shave, halq. But in this context, what comes to your mind when Imam al-Rida says, you can trim here, but you can't trim here? He's talking about you can't shave completely here. Dalala tasawwur. What do you think in your mind when you hear this hadith? So not directly when you see the word, that's only what it could mean. It's also what could the context imply based on your intuition. Two different methodologies. Do you see? That's just the very drop of the very beginning of usul al-fiqh. And that's bahth al-alfaz. Nahik, not, let alone, not even considering bahth, for example, al-usul al-amaliyya, al-ta'arud, bahth, for example, al-mustaqillat al-aqliyya, logical reasoning, bahth al-jar wa-ta'dil, ahadith, bahth al-nahu wa-sarf, bahth al-tafsir, bahth, all of these, al-fiqh, al-mu'asir, fiqh al-istidlali. These are so many different chapters. You're not even touching those. You're just talking about how do words get their meanings. And each section breaks up to different ones as well. That's ijtihad. That's just one component of ijtihad. To actually have mastered the sciences. Saying, okay, you've mastered these sciences. What else does it take? It takes real world application. You as a scholar, inshallah, all of you will also embark on this path. You look at and you understand what Ahlul Bayt meant and said, it's about application too. You deal with real world changes. Bitcoin was a big issue. Bitcoin was a huge one people studied at. Because does it include real world currencies? Is it backed by anything? What does it mean to be decentralized? Can you buy? Can you sell? But wait, Bitcoin is very volatile. It goes up and down. Is it real money? So they would have to look at the real world. They have to know the real issue. That's why there's a discussion on, there's a faqih definitely. Then there's the wali faqih, wali amr al-muslimin. This one needs to look at the world issue because I am a father to all of these. I'm a dad to all of these. These are like my children. You know, there were the only few religious leaders, and I'll say this with confidence. Only few, you can count them by one hand, not even two. You have about 5. Who when the Myanmar-Burma crisis happened, only a few world religious leaders. One of them, the Dalai Lama, was silent. And even though you're talking about their own region, he was silent. The Pope came up, spoke, for goodness sake. And a marja' in Najaf, and a marja' in Qum. And you know and love them all very well. Sent millions of dollars to help these people that were suffering. Many of them were not even from the same madhab. And by the way, you don't need to see your own madhab as an example. How many of our ulama made us so proud when we said, that's my leader. When people from a different madhab were suffering. And you're like, I'm so honored to say that you're my marja' deen. And not just that. When all of the crises happened, I'm honored to say these are my maraja'. There's one marja' I follow for fiqh, yes. But we should live in a world where we should stop fighting about you follow him. Because the funny thing is, all of our maraja' love each other. Sometimes we make petty teenage problems. You follow X, you follow Y, and I say get a life. Wallah, get a life. We don't have time for this. There are problems happening, there are concerns rising, and we are fighting over things that the maraja' themselves are not even fighting about. Proper application. There's a third component to ijtihad. So we said first is actual intelligence of the matter. Once you got your 7 PhDs on the subjects, there's a second application. You have to know the real world issues. Cloning, IVF, corona, this issue, what's the hukm? You have to know real world politics. I have to apply it. You can't just study and sit to the side. You're not a mujtahid then. The third thing requires a little bit of stardust. Magic, if you will. You require the tawfiq of Allah. Our ulama, many of them would say that I would ask Allah for a fatwa, that I will not write a fatwa unless Sahib al-Zaman's hand grabs my hand and writes with it. Because this is something that I will be accountable for on the Day of Judgment. I am telling them, believe me, having studied and worked and did so much, and that's why you find many of them say, look, out of precaution, he's not even issuing you the fatwa. It requires the charm. As Imam al-Sadiq says, لَيْسَ الْعِلْمِ بِكَثْرَةِ التَّعَلُّمِ إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمِ هُوَ نُورٌ يَقْذِفُهُ اللَّهُ فِي قَلْبِ مَنْ يَشَاءَ هِدَايَةً. That ilm is not from how much you were taught or how much you learn. Ilm, we said it the one night you were here, inshallah, is a light, nur, that Allah puts in the heart of someone. Otherwise, a kafir can study fiqh usul and say, look, follow me. Why not? You don't have the nur of Ahlul Bayt in you. You don't have the hidayah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't have the wilayah of Ahlul Bayt. And how can the wilayah of Ahlul Bayt be in something that has no genuine intention, no genuine purpose, like artificial intelligence? AI. Why do I have to follow? I just go here. Where's the wilayah? It's pattern recognition based on biases, what's available online only. And people put what they want online, so there's multiple biases. In the next few nights, we're going to analyze the difference between how our madhab issues fatwa and other madhahib based on the shura and the council of either moon sighting of a country, and what distinguishes one over the other, and which one could you actually go to sleep saying, I'm in good hands. And the very interesting question, why can't we have multiple maraji' for one segment? Like how there's a shura, let's say for example in the Arabian Peninsula or in Jami'at al-Azhar of Cairo, where there's a council and they all vote on one. Why isn't two heads better than one? And why it's better that we have one? This inshallah, the next nights you will see very soon. Given all of this, the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I find you, and I'm not just saying this because it's Muharram, one of the best absolute prime examples that demonstrated all of these conditions is genuinely Muslim ibn Aqil ibn Abi Talib. How? Muslim ibn Aqil, for you who we need to know a little bit more, Muslim ibn Aqil is Imam al-Husayn's brother-in-law. You would say that, wait, Muslim ibn Aqil is his cousin. Muslim ibn Aqil also married Imam al-Husayn's sister. According to traditions, Ruqayya, the daughter of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. So does that make Imam al-Husayn and Muslim ibn Aqil his cousin? Makes him brother-in-law, Nasiba. He's also Ibn Ammah, because Imam al-Husayn is the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. Muslim ibn Aqil is the son of Aqil ibn Abi Talib. So Ibn Ammah and Nasiba. And Imam al-Husayn says he's not just family related to me. Muslim ibn Aqil is an alim. He's a scholar. He's very well learned. And then he says he has something none of us have. None of any of the Shia have, except Muslim. He has what I call thiqah. When he sends this letter to the people of Kufa, he calls him this. He says, إِنِّي قَدْ بَعَثْتُ لَكُمْ أَخِي وَابْنَ عَمِّي وَثِقَتِي مِنْ أَهْلَ بَيْتِي. Imam Hussein didn't give this to anyone. Imagine Imam Hussein calls you my brother. And he look at him and he says, not just my brother, we have brothers. Is there someone who's the most reliable from your family? Some might say, wait a minute, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. Abu al-Fadl is the nafs of Imam al-Husayn. Let's put him to the side. Abu al-Fadl is the nafs of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas was to Imam al-Husayn what Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib was to Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. So put the nafs to the side. After the nafs, who's the most reliable and the most qualified? Imam al-Husayn says, how much do you love Imam al-Husayn? Love who he loved. He says, I have sent to you, O people of Kufa, to verify whether what you claim is true or false. My brother, my cousin, and the most reliable of my family. How did Muslim get this? It starts off at home. It starts off at home. Some people say all the tawfiq for the ulama is for how they studied. Muslim's an alim, by the way. A grand alim. Hafidh and a mudarris of the Quran in Kufa. Muslim ibn Aqil. You typically don't associate these sciences with them. Very much. Before he's a warrior, he's a scholar. And how beautiful is the warrior scholar, by the way. And we've all seen many who came and مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ رِجَالٌ صَدَقُوا مَا عَاهَدُوا اللَّهِ. In this context, brothers and sisters, Rasulullah says about the father of Muslim, Ya Aqil, inni li'uhibbuka hubbain, hubban lak, wa hubban lihub Abi Talib lak. Aqil ibn Abi Talib, my cousin, the father of Muslim. Rasulullah says about his dad, I love you double the love. Not just love you once, I love you double. Because of the love I have for you, that's one. Because of you. And I also love you, O Aqil, because of the love Abu Talib has for you. It shows you how much Rasulullah loves the love of Abu Talib, right? That's on Muslim's dad. And imagine him now, Muslim ibn Aqil. He was raised in the house of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, and he married the daughter of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, and he was Imam al-Husayn's closest companion and friend growing up. In fact, some ahadith about Sayyid al-Shuhada are narrated by him. He dispatches Muslim, the wakil, the safir of Imam al-Husayn, because he's a scholar, he's loyal, he's trustworthy. And this is what it takes to have ijtihad. But of course, Ahlul Bayt, they don't do ijtihad. They give you the hukm right there because they're connected to Allah. Muslim is sent. When he's sent and he enters Kufa, brothers and sisters, he enters it and he sees that it's too late. Ibn Ziyad had already reached Kufa before him because Yazid sacked the governor of Kufa and allowed Ibn Ziyad from Basra to come and live there before him, and he took over. When Muslim entered Kufa, he realized he had to live in hiding. And he enters, by the way, not alone. He's not by himself. He comes in with a couple hundred. Some ahadith I've read in history show about 500 people. Now that's an army, right? He comes into, and Kufa's small. The first thing he does is he says, we have a mission, sah, but clearly the establishment had took over. So now we're in a very tight situation. Let's first go and pray together. He enters Masjid al-Kufa. May Allah give you an eye, a tawfiq to go to that masjid, inshallah, where he is buried. And he begins to pray. Now notice, people talk so much. People will say, yes, hayhat, minna dhilla, na'am, with you till the end, ya laytana, 1, 2, and 3, and it's all nonsense. Muslim ibn Aqil is praying salah. He starts with 500. When he goes and finishes Maghrib, he looks behind him, it's exactly half, 250. He begins Salat al-Isha, and in the middle of the salah, half of that leave. He has about 125. When he finishes close to the last rak'ah, he has 50. When he does his tashahhud, he turns around and he was all by himself. People will say, Ya laytana kunna ma'ak. I remember the alim who said, I had a dream and I saw myself in Karbala. And I said, Mawlai, my whole life I've been saying, Ya laytana, thank you, I'm here. What can I do? He says, oh Shaykh Abdul Zahar al-Ka'bi, rahmatullahi alayh. So Shaykhana, in salah we pray, you stand and you guard us. You know how Imam Hussein would pray jama'ah and he had people standing around. Salamullahi alayhi with shields. They'll shoot us arrows. Even in salah, they don't care. So you just stand and guard. If the arrow comes and you have to, use your own self to protect me. He says, Sayyidna fidak nafsi. Of course, what is an arrow? My life, may it be ransom for you. He says, I'm standing. This is in his dream. He says, I'm standing. And I see an arrow come, and you have one job. You have a shield, just block. He says, I couldn't stand and have the arrow come at me. I had to step to the side and hit my imam. He says, get your act together, Shaykhana. What are you talking about? You don't let your imam get hit. He says, okay, I formatted myself again. Another arrow came, I dodged it. A third, a fourth. By the time the imam finished salah, I looked, he was filled with arrows. He looked like I couldn't even see his figure from how much the arrows had hit his body. He said, when I woke up, that taught me. When I say, Ya laytana kunna ma'ak, it's in the moments of shada'id. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib says, ما مضمون الحديث أنه عند تقلب الأحوال تظهر حقائق الرجال. وين الرجال? Where are they? عند تقلب الأحوال. Want to be a man? When we say men, it's an expression of being strong in some cases. There are men that ran away and women stayed behind, by the way. In Uhud, a lady stood with her spear and said, where are you Jubana going? This is your prophet fighting. 8 people, one of them a lady. This happened again in the battle of Thaqif and Hawazin, the battle of Hunayn. 4 were remaining. One of them Ali, one a lady. عند تقلب الأحوال. When situations begin to turn and shift and change and become contentious, the true colors of men show. Muslim ibn Aqil's أحوال انقلبت 180 درجة. He could just go. 500, let them leave, because they're not meant to stand for anything. I will stand for my Imam. Muslim ibn Aqil knows his hukum and his taklif, and at that night he makes it to the house of Hani ibn Urwa. Hani, when you visit Kufa, you see that there's one side what? Masjid Kufa. Muslim ibn Aqil, Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, Hani. This Hani is madloom. He goes to his house, he's an old man. He says, Ya Hani, we have to invite Ibn Ziyad to the home. And when he comes, I will hide behind the curtain. Like a curtain right here, I'm behind it. When he comes, you give me the signal, I will strike. When his back is turned. Ibn Ziyad, if you had killed him, he comes and takes control of Kufa. They make it happen. Hani ibn Urwa was a shaykh, hafiz of the Quran, scholar. Ibn Ziyad accepts his invite. He comes and he has Asha, and Hani ibn Urwa keeps making the signal. They say the hadith was he would say, Ana atshan, I'm thirsty, I'm thirsty, I'm thirsty. One hadith says he would take off his imamah and put it on the floor. Yalla, come and do your thing. Ibn Ziyad said, you old man, what's going on with you? You seem to be weird and strange. I think your age is getting to you. Goodbye. Hani comes to Muslims like, yeah, Muslim, you gave you so many chances. Why didn't you hit him? He says, I was going to. But then I remembered what my teacher and mentor, Ali ibn Abi Talib, taught me. That you never hit a man who's not ready, who's unarmed, and you never backstab someone. He has nothing to defend himself. I don't want to be a ghaddar. And just when he's not looking, I attack. I have to face him one-on-one. Look how principled he was, subhanAllah. Hani ibn Urwa, in that context, he says, if Ibn Ziyad visited me, it's custom that I have to visit him. Otherwise, it'll look like I had an agenda. As he goes, Ibn Ziyad captures him and slaughters Hani ibn Urwa. They torture him. They kill him. He's, by the way, a sahabi of Rasulullah. He met Rasulullah. And he narrates a hadith. Muslim has nowhere to go now. He's wandering on the streets. The gharib of Kufa is on the streets wandering now. Notice, someone Imam al-Hussein loves. His cousin. His best friend growing up. Someone who he says, this is my brother, is wandering the streets of Kufa. And he gets to a home of a lady by the name of Taw'a. And Taw'a in the house sees her daughter go and examine who's at the front of the door. And when she sees the door, Taw'a's daughter comes and she's crying. She says, my daughter, why are you crying? Did you see who's sitting at the front? She says, I saw a man. I saw tears in his eyes. Mother. Taw'a goes and says to her, what did he tell you? She said, I asked him, what's your name? And all he said was, Ana gharib Kufa. I'm the stranger of Kufa. I have nowhere to go. Taw'a goes to him and she asks him, oh stranger, what's your name? Why are you hanging around here by the footsteps of my door? Muslim ibn Aqil ibn Abi Talib tells her, my name is Muslim. She says to him, Muslim son of who? He says to her, I am the son of Aqil, the son of Abu Talib, ibn Abd al-Muttalib. She says, wait a minute, are you the nephew of my Imam? Are you the nephew of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam? He says, Bala. She lets him inside her home. And while he's there, she begins to inform him that, Ya Muslim, I cannot shelter you for too long. I have a son who works for the forces of Ibn Ziyad al-La'in. But you can stay as long as you wish. If my son returns, I don't know how to protect you. Muslim says, thank you for all that you've done. Can I have just some water? I've been wandering these streets. All I want is a sip of water from you. Taw'a gives him that water. She says, all I hear him do in his room upstairs was that he kept praying to Allah. He kept doing tasbih until my son returned from Ibn Ziyad. He asked me, mother, is there someone here? She says, no one is here. She says, Bala, are you hiding him? She says, listen, fear Allah, my son. This is not good to do. What will you say to his grandfather? What will you say to his uncle, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen? As her son goes to Ibn Ziyad to inform him, Ibn Ziyad then says, dispatch all the forces on that one house. It's normal for these tyrants and these tughat to destroy a home with all their forces. As they all came to the home, about 4,000 of them surrounded the house. And Kufa is known to be very tight, and the alleys were very narrow, so all of them piled as much as they could. Muslim ibn Aqil says to her, "Thank you for what you have offered me. I shall leave you away, for I don't want the commotion to also trouble you. This is my jihad." Muslim ibn Aqil goes outside and with his sword begins to fight valiantly against the enemies of Allah. And one by one he begins to exterminate all of them. Ibn Ziyad's forces say, "Wayhakum ahadha ibn akhi Ali ibn Abi Talib." Send all your forces to him. This is the nephew of Ali. This is the son of the brother of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He is not someone to be reckoned with. So they begin to shoot at him arrows from every single angle. Some of them stand on the roofs and throw stones at Muslim ibn Aqil. Muslim one by one fights them all, but he cannot handle and tolerate every angle they attack him. Muslim ibn Aqil is struck from the back with a spear. One of the enemies of Allah, as he sees him lay down, throws a stone to the side of his head. They catch Muslim and tie his hands behind his back. They take him to the court of Ibn Ziyad. This is the nephew of Ali ibn Abi Talib. This is the brother-in-law of Imam al-Hussein. As he goes to the court of Ibn Ziyad, he says to him, "Before you kill me, I have a final will. I ask you, tell Hussein to not come to Kufa. He sent me here to verify. Tell him don't come. And I ask you to bury me the death of the Shar' of Allah. And I ask you one last favor, just a pail of water." Ibn Ziyad said, "As for Hussein, we will not inform him. As for a Islamic burial, you will not get this. As for water, we will give you some." They bring the pail of water to Muslim. Muslim ibn Aqil, they had hit him on his teeth, salamullahi alayh. So his mouth, peace and blessings be upon him, was gushing blood. As he goes to drink the water, drops of blood fall into it. And he says, "I can't drink this." And so they bring him another one, more blood falls, until Muslim raises his head and says, "It's as if Allah wants me to feel what Hussein will endure in Karbala, and I am deprived blood. Asa wa la'al." They take him to the roof of the castle of Ibn Ziyad, and they stand him by the side. This is the son of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib's brother. This is the thiqah of Ahl al-Bayt. And they push him from the roof of the palace. As he falls down, he says, "Assalamu alayk, Ya Aba Abdullah." Imam al-Hussein is on his way to Karbala, and as he walks, he stops. He says, "Wa alayk as-salam, Ya Muslim." And peace and blessings of Allah be on you, Ya Muslim. He goes to the daughter of Muslim ibn Aqil, Hamida bint Muslim. He places his hand on her forehead, and she says, "Uncle, have I become an orphan?" He says, "Why do you say that?" She says, "Because Rasulullah said, if an orphan child loses their parent, then you tap them on the head, give them some comfort." Imam Hussein said to her, "Oh Hamida, you are now my daughter. My daughters are your sisters. Ruqayya and Sukayna are now your siblings. I am your father. Ya Hussein, Hamida had you. Ya Hussein, who did Sukayna have when she went to Sham? Wa wayla, aywa Muslima."